Hey y'all, welcome and welcome back. So for today's video, we're going to be doing another adult movie review, and this time we are going to be taking a look at 13 Wishes from Monster High. Just in case you guys haven't seen any of the previous videos in the series before, as like a catch-up of the premise, I didn't see any of the old Monster High media when I was younger, none of the episodes or the movies, and so this series is me watching them for the first time, obviously, as an adult, and giving you my thoughts on them. If you have seen these videos before, you will know that historically I have not loved most of the old Monster High media, and sadly 13 Wishes is not an exception. That's not to say it's like the most terrible thing ever. I definitely don't think it's the worst movie from Monster High that I've seen, but it's most certainly not the best either, and I didn't love it, so we will be talking about that today. Before I get into why I feel that way, though, I do have to give the typical disclaimer that these are just my opinions, and you guys are absolutely allowed to disagree with me, and I would love to hear your thoughts either way in the comments down below. Also, this will be like a spoiler-filled review. It's just a lot easier for me to make these videos if I assume that you guys already know what I'm talking about. So if you haven't seen 13 Wishes, go ahead and pause this, watch the movie, and then come back so that we can like all be on the same page. And lastly, if you do find yourself enjoying the video, if you could give it a like, that's super helpful to me. If you're new here and you enjoy your time, definitely subscribe so you can see more. And then if you want to go out of your way to support me in another way, I have a bunch of links in my description for like wish lists and PO Box and other social media. You don't have to check those out, but if you want to, they are there for you. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the review. So normally in these videos, I point out Abby as my favorite character. I think she's just always hilarious when she's on screen. She's always a great character. And 13 Wishes was no exception. I still loved Abby. But this time I think a different character was my favorite, and that's like new for me. Most of the time it is Abby, but I really, really loved Twyla in this movie. Since I'm watching the old Monster High movies in order, this is like the first time that I viewed any media that really delved into Twyla's personality pretty much at all. I don't even honestly remember if she was in the webisodes that I watched, and I don't think she's really made an appearance in the movies before, so this was like an introduction to her, and I just found her to be such an enjoyable character. She's an excellent friend to Howleen. She's very like down to earth and be yourself, and kind of has like a calming presence. At least I felt like she did. I honestly feel like we would have been best friends in high school. Like, I just adored her character in general, and every time she was on screen, I found myself enjoying the movie just a little bit more. I also think another cool thing with Twyla, at least like within the context of 13 Wishes, is that because she's the daughter of the boogeyman, she has kind of shadow powers, and so she can sort of sense Wisp throughout the movie. For most of 13 Wishes, almost all of the characters can't interact with Wisp and don't know that she's there, and like, she's not even like really a character to them at all, but because Twyla has this connection with the shadows and Wisp is Gigi's shadow, she has this sense that something is going wrong, and I just think that is such a cool, fun concept. Like, I just thought that was a very interesting way to play into Twyla's boogeyman powers. I honestly wish that it had been more of a focal point in the movie, just because I think it was one of the most interesting things brought up, and I liked Twyla so much, so maybe that's just my bias talking. I think it was really, really cool, though, that we got what we did, so I'm not really complaining. I'm just saying I wish we had pushed it even further because it was so much fun. But yeah, in general, Twyla was an absolute delight to have on screen. I found myself enjoying the movie whenever she was there. Whenever she was not there, though, definitely less so. If you've seen any of my previous Monster High movie reviews, you've probably heard me complain about these subplots. That's like easily my #1 complaint when it comes to these films. They aren't particularly long, and I feel like every movie almost is filled with so many subplots. Sometimes they aren't really connected to the main plot, and it just makes the movie feel very crowded, and I don't really think that they're doing anything. I think they're honestly subtracting from the main plot for the most part. To be fair to 13 Wishes, I will say that all of the subplots do connect to the main storyline because they're all there as a way for Howleen to wish for something, and then they like serve as a lesson about how the wishes can go wrong. So they do serve a purpose. They're not useless subplots, but I just still feel like it was so hectic and there was so much going on, and I just didn't enjoy all of them. So like, while I understand why they're there, and I do think that they maybe needed to be there in some capacity, I wish that less screen time had been given to them so that they felt more like subplots, like little mini lessons, and less like they were competing with the main story, if that makes sense. I'm not going to talk about each individual subplot just because My main complaint is that they exist. It's not necessarily with the subplots themselves, but I do want to give you a rundown of what they all are so you know what I mean when I say that this movie felt like a bit congested with them. So first of all, you have Cleo, who has Halloween wish that she isn't popular, and so she's struggling with the fact that no one at Monster High even remembers who she is, which is an interesting subplot. I'm not trying to knock it. That's going to be the theme with most of these. You also have Abby, who wants to run for the student disembodied president because she thinks she can evoke positive change at Monster High. We also have the continuation of the drama within Gale and Laguna's relationship. Quick note on that. I've mentioned in previous videos before that I don't want to make a video or make any commentary within a video about their relationship, positive or negative, until I see all of the media so I really know how everything stands. I probably am going to do a dedicated video once I finish everything on Gale and Laguna because I think it's a very interesting and obviously controversial relationship. But yeah, so that's why I'm not explaining anything in here. And then the last and easily the worst subplot to me is that Manny, Heath, and Claude are on a very dangerous game show. With the exception of that game show, which I thought was terrible and I hated every second that it was on screen, I don't really think these are bad subplots. I don't think that they are bad things to explore. I just think that they needed more time and needed to be the focus of maybe a webisode or a short film or something. I don't really know how that would be done, but I think in the context of 13 Wishes, they couldn't be given enough time to truly live up to their potential necessarily. And then they also had the added negative of kind of detracting and taking away screen time from the main plot. So overall, it just felt like a lot was going on with the subplots, which again is something that I say a lot. I do think part of the problem across all of the Monster High media with the subplots and why it becomes so overwhelming, at least to me, is because there's so many characters. And I do understand why, this is to promote a doll line and so anytime you're going to make a new character for a doll, you want to be able to promote that character. And I also like the fact that there are so many characters in the sense that I think it gives people an opportunity to find a character that they relate to much easier. If there's only 4 characters to pick from, that might be harder. Whereas Monster High has so many characters that there's probably one that you relate to, which is good. But the downside to that is that there's so many characters that need to be involved at any given point in time that I think it's a lot harder for writers to kind of wrangle them together into something that makes sense. I don't know, a bit of a tangent, but I just had thoughts on the matter. I'm not really shy about the fact that I don't like Gen 1 Frankie. In fact, I say it pretty often here on the channel. I just never really got into her dolls up until G3 Frankie became a thing, and I just relate to them a lot more than I related to Gen 1 Frankie, even just in style and from the little bit of information that I had from diaries and hearing about the Monster High community. And through watching these movies, I honestly have begun to like G1 Frankie less and less, which I know hurts because I know that she is someone that a lot of the fans do enjoy, so I'm sorry, but I am here to complain about Frankie. Feel free to skip this section if you just don't want to hear it, because I don't mean to be mean. I'm not trying to slander your favorite character. She's just very much not my favorite character. So as with many of the Monster High movies, 13 Wishes features narration by Frankie, which is just something that I take issue with in general. I feel like this happens a decent amount in the media, and I don't feel like it almost ever adds something to the movie. I think literally the first movie, New Ghoul at School, had Frankie narrating, and that made sense because it was a movie specifically about her. It was kind of like she was reading from her diary almost about her experiences. So the narration there made sense. In pretty much every other movie that she's done this, I don't think that the narration made sense for Frankie. Honestly, I don't know that 13 Wishes needed to be narrated in general, but I especially don't think that it should have been done by Frankie, and it's just something that she gets to do because she's the main character, and so she's given this status, but I don't think it makes sense. If there had to be narration for 13 Wishes, I think that it would have made a lot more sense for Wisp to be telling the story because it's how she got to be free of her lamp, or for Howleen to talk about her struggles that she faced during the movie, or even Twyla talking about what happened to her best friend, or Claudine talking about what happened to her sister. There's so many other characters that narration would have made more sense for than Frankie, and again, I'm not necessarily advocating for the narration in general because I don't think it's necessary a lot of the time, but if there was going to be narration, the only reason Frankie got it is because she's the main character, and it's irritating to me. That has been a big theme with my complaints about Frankie, is that she gets placed in positions and gets to do things and say things because she's the main character. And it just always bothers me. I think there should be a reason beyond this is the main character so that they get to do this. Another example of this is how Gigi spends like a lot of one-on-one time in the movie with Frankie. I say a lot of, I immediately wanted to take that back. It's not necessarily a ton, but I think she spends more one-on-one time with Frankie than she does with any other character, which just baffles me. And again, it doesn't make sense. I feel like if Gigi was going to spend one-on-one time with anybody, Howleen makes a ton of sense since Howleen is the one who found her lamp and Gigi is trying to like not get too involved but also try to keep Howleen on the same path. And even if you want to go beyond that, I think if Gigi was talking to Claudine because Claudine is concerned about how her sister is using the wishes, that would have made sense. Or if she was talking to Twyla because Howleen is her best friend, so she's like, Gigi, I don't like what these wishes are doing to my best friend, that would have made more sense. But it just doesn't make sense to me for those one-on-one conversations to be with Frankie. I don't know. Again, I'm biased, so like maybe I'm complaining for nothing. I just found it really frustrating. And another interaction between Frankie and Gigi was where the whole movie, Gigi is talking about how, because of like genie rules and her own past and everything, she can't tell Howleen about Wisp. Like, she can't mention that Wisp is a thing, and that's why she can't fully protect Howleen from Wisp's influence. So Frankie suggests that Gigi tell her and then Draculaura and Ghoulia about Wisp instead of talking to Howleen. And Gigi's like flabbergasted by this loophole. She's like, oh my gosh, this is a great idea. Okay, I'll tell you guys. And I'm just irritated by it. I'm sorry. It's treated as though it's like this novel, special idea that like no one could come up with. You're telling me that in the hundreds, maybe thousands of years that Gigi has been doing this, she's never thought about telling the friends or family of the Finder about Wisp and about the danger that their loved one faces? Like, she's never thought of that. I just don't believe that. Like, I just don't believe that in all that time that she has to ponder this and ponder how she's going to deal with it and all the time that she's trying to fight against Wisp, this has never occurred to Gigi. And everyone treats it like this amazing idea that's just like so out of the blue and like crazy. It's not that special an idea. It's only treated as such because Frankie said it, and I'm irritated by it and I'm getting a little bit heated. I am sorry. I just really don't like Frankie. I have kind of mixed feelings about Gigi. For the most part, for most of the movie, I feel really bad for her. Of course, there is the whole like genie stuck in a lamp with almost no one to talk to except for someone who really doesn't like you anymore. So like that's already pretty tragic. But also there's this weird thing when Gigi does come out of the lamp that for a portion of the movie, some of the characters really aren't treating her so much as like a monster as they are treating her as an object or like an oddity that they're so amazed to find. It's just a little bit strange to me how she's handled, and I feel really bad that like other characters are treating her as such. Like throughout the early part of the movie, Howleen is talking about, I have a genie, the same way I might say, I have a phone. And it just strikes me as weird and sad, and it makes me feel bad for Gigi. But then every time I feel bad for her, I'm reminded of one instance in the movie that makes it extremely difficult for me to feel sympathy for her, and that is the fact that Gigi turned Laguna into a freshwater monster. Now, she does this because Howleen sees the fact that Laguna and Gil are, like, struggling, and she wishes that Gil's parents liked Laguna. To me, that sounds like we should turn the bigots into less bigoted people, right? Like, that seems like the obvious and best solution in this scenario. But instead what happens is Gigi turns Laguna into a freshwater monster, so Gil's parents can't object to her being a saltwater monster anymore. And it's not as though Gigi can't change people's emotions, because later on we see her change the whole school's emotions towards Howleen because Howleen wishes to be popular. So that's not an excuse. And it's not as though Howleen asked for Laguna to turn into a freshwater monster. She just asked for Gil's parents to like Laguna. So it's not Howleen's fault in this situation either. I don't know what rules like Gigi might have to be following that are maybe unspoken. I don't know why she chose this route, but I think she ended up doing like the possible worst thing in terms of how to solve this problem is like changing the species of someone to appease the bigots. Like, that's like the worst way you could have gone about this. I don't know if it's Gigi's fault or not because I don't feel like I was given enough information, but it does make me feel weird. So the ending of this movie is weird. The big thing is that both Wisp and Howleen get kind of a redemption, and definitely Howleen deserves it more than Wisp. And I think some people would have a problem with the fact that Wisp got a redemption because, like, She was a very villainous villain. She's literally brainwashing Howleen throughout the movie, and her end goal is essentially world domination, which on a scale of, you know, badness is pretty darn bad. So I mean, I can understand why people would think that she doesn't deserve a redemption arc, and I do kind of agree with that. I get why it's done because this is a kids movie, so they might want to go a little lighter on the villain punishment. So, you know, it's not something that's necessarily, like, surprising to me, but I get why it's frustrating to see. I do wish if they were going to give Wisp a redemption arc, it had been a little bit more gradual and, like, maybe her goals weren't quite so terrible so that she felt more deserving of the redemption arc. But the other thing here is that in the end of the movie, Wisp technically gets what she wants. She gets her wish granted and she becomes the genie of the lamp. It's framed as a redemption, and I don't know if it's a redemption. Like, she gets her wish, but the whole movie is about the fact that you might think you need or want things, and you make those wishes, and they can go badly very easily. And I feel like that is exactly what is happening with Wisp here, because Howleen's final wish is to make Gigi, like, free of the lamp, and Wisp becomes the actual genie. The reason that Wisp was, like, doing all of these things and, like, wanted to escape the lamp so badly is because she was jealous that Gigi got to go out in a physical form and interact with other people. So essentially it was loneliness that was causing her to do all of this. As the genie of the lamp, she is still going to be violently lonely. Gigi isn't there anymore, so even though they didn't have a good relationship, the only other being in the lamp is going to be gone. Wisp is 100% alone in the lamp, and she's going to spend most of her time in the lamp. So it's like, if loneliness is why she was acting out, and the solution is supposedly to turn her into a real genie so she can be summoned, that's not really solving the loneliness problem. And at the end of the movie also, her lamp gets, like, knocked over into the deep end of the Monster High pool, which is essentially a never-ending, terrifying ocean. So despite what Frankie's narration says, I very highly doubt that Wisp's lamp is going to be found, if at all, definitely not found anytime soon. So she's going to be subjected to the same loneliness that drove her to do these terrible things for years and years and years, potentially. So it's just, like, a weird situation in my head, because there's the question of, does Wisp deserve redemption? Like, should she have gotten her wish granted? But then also, I feel like her wish granted was a form of punishment. It's just a little bit muddy and a little bit confusing to me, and I wish that it were written differently. Also, not nearly as important, but it did strike me as very strange. At the end of the film, when Wisp becomes a genie, she gets, like, a redesign. I don't think it's a particularly good redesign, and I also think it was extremely unnecessary. So, not as big a complaint as, like, the murkiness of the ending, but it was weird to me, so I wanted to point it out there. And that's pretty much everything I have to say about 13 Wishes. I do apologize for it being mostly negative. I feel so bad that most of these videos are negative, because I know some of you guys love these movies, and it's like, I don't want to be slandering things that you enjoy, but I'm just giving you my thoughts on them. I think, I've said this about multiple Monster High movies before, I believe, that 13 Wishes kind of felt like a first draft of something that could have been really, really cool, but instead of reworking it and getting it to the point where it was really cool, it was just published as the first draft, and so it feels a little bit messy and a little bit, like, underworked in some areas, and I feel like the bones are honestly really good. Like, the concept is not a bad concept at all, and I do think it's better than some other Monster High movies that I've watched, but it needed to be reworked and it didn't, and it's just disappointing that that keeps happening with these movies. Those are just my thoughts though, and as I said before, I would love to hear what you guys thought of 13 Wishes and also my commentary on it in the comments down below. The next movie I'm going to be watching is Fright's Camera Action, which I'm kind of excited for. I really loved the dolls for that movie, like Honey and Elizabeth and Viperine especially. I thought were really, really beautiful new characters and dolls, so I'm hoping that the movie will be just as interesting and portray them in a really, really fun way. Fingers crossed, but definitely be on the lookout for the video review of that coming up soon. So yes, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day or your night, whatever it might be, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye, guys!